If you thought the trial of Amber Heard and Johnny Depp was full of drama, you haven't seen nothing yet. Sam Bankman-Fried was once, and I quote, the Father Teresa of philanthropy, to use a description that I did just make up. Now he is, and I quote, one of the most hated people in the world, to use a description that he made up. He's not wrong. And in just a matter of days, SBF, and no doubt the whole crypto industry, will be thrown back into the spotlight as his trial begins in New York City. The key question that the judge will have to determine is this: did the FTX founder deliberately commit fraud and conspire to defraud investors? Or was it all one great big screw-up, but one with no criminal intent? Or maybe a mix of the two? SBF stands accused of 7 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering, charges that come with a maximum sentence of 115 years in the big house. This video will cover everything that you need to know about the upcoming trial, why it matters, what to expect, and what the verdict will likely be. We'll look at the facility that SBF is currently incarcerated in, examine his parents' role at FTX, and reveal some potential twists in the tale along the way. Now back to SBF. As I'm filming this, SBF is holed up in the Metropolitan Detention Center, or the MDC in Brooklyn. If you watched our last video on SBF, you'll know that his outrageous pre-trial shenanigans, like sharing extracts from his ex-girlfriend and ex-Alameda Research CEO Caroline Ellison's diary with the press, are to blame for his current incarceration. He has been out on bail at his parents' multi-million-dollar home in Stanford, California before. Now, because of his antics, he has been provided with a much less comfortable accommodation. Conditions at MDC, from all accounts, are pretty grim. The facility grabbed headlines a few years ago after a power cut in winter left inmates suffering in the bitter cold. The lawyers for Ghislaine Maxwell, a famous former inmate, compared it to Hannibal Lecter's prison in The Silence of the Lambs. Beyond power outages, inmates have also complained about sewage leaks and maggots in their food. Makes living back at your parents seem pretty sweet now, doesn't it? Speaking of food, SBF, a vegan, has reportedly been avoiding the meaty dishes served in the canteen. Instead, he's been subsiding on bread, water, and the occasional peanut butter sandwich, which he can purchase twice daily for $3.65 a pop, using his allowance. Now, that does seem a lot for a peanut butter sandwich, but hey, inflation is getting all of us. And for this nugget of information and much more, I have to thank CoinDesk, whose coverage of the pre-trials going on, both in the form of articles and podcasts, has been excellent. Much of this report, I might add, is informed in part by CoinDesk coverage. I'll leave relevant links in the description below. Now that you have a sense of FBF's living arrangements and therefore the backdrop to the court case, let's move on to the trial itself. The trial begins on the 3rd of October. The first step will be the selection of the jury, 12 men and/or women, good and true. According to a legal expert contacted by CoinDesk, each of the jurors will be fought over by the defense and the prosecution, a process which could take several days. Next, the prosecutor, which is the Department of Justice or DOJ, and the defense, i.e. SBF's lawyers, will make their opening statements. Remember, a key point both sides will be arguing about is intent. Specifically, did SBF intend to commit the crimes he did and is on trial for? Then the prosecution will present its evidence and then question the witnesses, before the defense will do the same. The jury will then weigh up the arguments that they heard and decide if Sam is guilty or not on each of the 7 counts, which I'll outline in the next section. Finally, if found guilty, Judge Kaplan will determine the appropriate sentence. One thing to keep in mind here, because that is a criminal trial, is for each count that SBF needs to be found guilty, and I quote, beyond reasonable doubt, by all 12 jurors. Think of beyond reasonable doubt as being over 90% certain. This is why the jury selection is so important. For each of the 7 counts, it takes just one juror to be unconvinced that there is sufficient evidence to convict SBF for him to be let off. Now, I should stress that if the jury doesn't reach a unanimous verdict, the judge will likely send them back to confer again until they do. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's first turn to the prosecution's case and the charges against SBF. They are conspiracy to commit wire fraud of customers of FTX, wire fraud of customers of FTX, conspiracy to commit wire fraud of lenders to Alameda Research, wire fraud of lenders to Alameda Research, conspiracy to commit fraud of customers of FTX in connection with the purchase and sale of derivatives, conspiracy to commit security fraud of investors in FTX, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Only two of these charges, wire fraud of FTX customers and Alameda Research lenders, are crimes SBF is alleged to have committed. The others are crimes the prosecutors allege he and at least one other person plan to commit. For the conspiracy charges, the prosecutors will have to clearly show SBF's deliberate intent to commit the alleged crime. Unless there is hard evidence, like clearly written material showing this intent, proving these charges could prove tricky. Next, let's talk about witnesses. From numerous filings in the pre-trial period, we have a pretty good idea of who could take the stand and broadly the topic they'll cover. However, we have no idea what order these witnesses will be called and obviously not the specifics of their testimonies. FTX's financials are incredibly complex. Therefore, the prosecution will have to bring witnesses who can help the jury to understand the topic at hand, as well as ones that will help convince the jury of SBF's guilt. Peter Easton, a professor from the University of Notre Dame and an accounting gigabrain, is expected to plug some information gap for the jury, particularly when it comes to customer deposits at FTX. According to a court filing, he's going to talk about things like, and I quote, Alameda Research's borrowing from lenders and the use of customer funds to repay those lenders. And, I quote, finding out about FTX's customer funds were used. He will not, the DOJ stressed, in a response to the objection by the defense, give his opinion about whether it's improper to do so. Also expected to take the stand is Andrea van der Marve. According to her biography, Andrea is an expert in, and I quote, complex litigation and regulatory investigations related to the financial markets, and has provided testimony expertise in the past. Another potential witness is an unnamed FBI agent, which kind of adds to the intrigue. We couldn't find any more information about them than this. But it's the testimonies from the next three witnesses that are likely to be the most explosive. That's because they're all members of FBF's inner circle at FTX. His FTX co-founders Gary Wang, Nishad Singh, along with Caroline Ellison, all pleaded guilty to criminal charges and have been cooperating with the prosecution for months. Gary was FTX's chief technology officer and knew SBF from when they were teenagers at math camp. Nishad was a school friend of FBF's brother, Gabe, and went on to become FTX's director of engineering. Both men were involved in writing FTX's code, and this, according to the filing, will be one area of focus in their testimonies. But they will also be called on to throw SBF under the bus and to try and convince the jury that SBF was not only aware of, but also the mastermind behind the criminal charges that he's standing for. However, it's going to be Caroline's testimony that will likely draw in the most attention, given her past romance with the accused. There is also the fact that I mentioned previously, SBF revealed details of her diary to the New York Times in an effort to, and I quote, intimidate the witness, according to Judge Kaplan. Will Caroline be out for revenge? Only time will tell.
Sorry to interrupt you folks, but I have to let you know about the Coin Bureau deals page. Now, my team and I have been able to pull together some of the best promos and discounts in the crypto space. We're talking trading fee discounts of over 50%, thousands of dollars in bonus airdrops, amazing deals at top exchanges, reduced prices on hardware wallets, and much, much more besides. So just go to coinbureau.com/deals, also linked to below, and find the promo suited to you. Enjoy the rest of the video.
After the prosecution presents its case, it will be the defense's turn. If you've been following the story, you'll know that SBF's team wanted to call 7 witnesses to rebut the testimonies presented by the prosecution and present evidence in SBF's favor. However, Judge Kaplan agreed with the objections made by the prosecution and rejected these witness applications. In a nutshell, he said that witness testimonies, which had to be outlined in legal filings, were unclear, irrelevant, and would disrupt the facts of the case. I'm speculating now, but maybe disrupting the case is a big part of SBF's game plan. To be really clear, the judge stated that SBF's team will still be allowed to call 4 of his witnesses, with a big caveat. They would have to provide, and I quote, proper disclosures at least 3 days before the witnesses might testify. The 4 witnesses that SBF's team might be able to call to the stand include 2 consultants, Thomas Bishop and Joseph Pimbley, as well as Brian Kim, a data analytics and forensics expert, and Andrew D. Wu, an assistant professor at the University of Michigan. At least 2 of these, Bishop and Kim, would be expected to present a counter to the testimony of the FBI agent, or Peter Easton, according to an order by the judge. The big question, however, is whether SBF himself will take to the stand. There is no legal obligation for him to do so, but this has been the trend in numerous high-profile cases, and SBF is clearly not shy of the limelight. The media tour de farce he embarked on after FTX's collapse won him no favors. But would his appearance on the stand be any different? We'll see. As for the defense's argument, this has already been revealed in a letter they published in August. They're planning, and I quote, an advice of counsel strategy. In other words, they'll claim that SBF acted on the advice of FTX's in-house attorneys and law firm Fenwick and West. They'll try to convince the jury that SBF isn't a criminal mastermind, but a young man who was in over his head or thought he was behaving properly, or, in legal speak, acting in good faith, but simply messed up. Here again, it comes down to intent. But there are a few risks to this strategy, as another CoinDesk article details. For one, the lawyers SBF is blaming may be summoned as witnesses, and who knows what they will say. Nothing intentionally in SBF's favor, you can be pretty sure about that. Then there is the issue of attorney-client privilege. If the jury decides that the advice falls under his privilege, then it won't be disclosed in court. Third, SBF's team will have to show that he did indeed act on the legal advice that he was given, which is a risky strategy, but possibly a winning one. What do you think, Larry?
I don't think so. And I'm never wrong about this stuff. Never.
Now let's fast forward to the verdict. Of course, no one will know what the jury will decide. The headlines show that technically SBF, if found guilty on all counts, could be sentenced to as many as 115 years in jail. In reality, according to several lawyers that CoinDesk has spoken to, he is unlikely to get more than 2 decades tops. Many of the alleged crimes revolve around the similar theme of fraud. Even if there are multiple convictions, the lawyers say SBF sentences will be served at the same time, not one after another. That said, the final verdict is up to Judge Kaplan. So far, I've outlined what to expect from the trial. Now, I do want to touch on a few unknown elements that could really shake things up. One is the extent to which SBF's political contributions, which are estimated to be in the tune of $100 million, will be covered in the trial. You might remember that in July, prosecutors dropped a campaign finance charge against SBF because the Bahamas, where FTX was based, and where SBF was arrested in December, told the United States that they did not intend to extradite him on the campaign finance charge. Last week, however, Judge Kaplan said the prosecution could still discuss his political donations during the trial. The judge said the topic was inextricably linked to his fraud charges and are, and I quote, relevant to establishing the defense's motive and allegedly fraudulent intent. You can be sure media outlets will be scrutinizing details of those political contributions. They relish in this kind of stuff. Less headline grabbing, but one thing that we will be keeping an eye on is whether the Alameda co-CEO and avid yachtsman Sam Trabucco will crop up in the trial. Sam and SBF have known each other from a 5-week math camp back in 2010. They reconnected at MIT before Sam T joined Alameda. he left Alameda last summer, a few months before things really hit the fan. Since FTX's downfall, Trabucco has completely disappeared from the public eye, leaving many questions unanswered. We don't know where he is and what he's up to, and whether he's been cooperating with authorities. It's also rather remarkable that he hasn't faced any charges, unlike the other FTX and Alameda top brass. Trabucco's appearance at the witness stand could be yet another twist in this dizzying drama. Last, but certainly not least, is whether or to what extent SBF's parents, Joseph Bankman and Barbara Fried, or Joan Barb, will come up in the trial. For context, on the 18th of September, FTX Trading filed a lawsuit alleging that SBF's parents used their influence over their son to enrich themselves and fund their interests. The lawsuit is part an effort by the company to recover assets for FTX's customers. Joe's defense is that while he was an FTX employee for 11 months, his focus was mainly on charitable projects, and he was not involved in the day-to-day running of the company. Unfortunately for him, news reports and details of the lawsuit suggest his involvement was much more than he let on. According to a New York Times report, Joe assisted FTX in hiring its legal team, participated in meetings with FTX leaders on Capitol Hill, provided counsel to his son in preparation for his testimony before the House of Financial Services Committee, and much more besides. Bloomberg reported earlier this month that Joe was a key legal advisor to FTX, which of course isn't a great look when his son's defense is essentially, "My lawyers told me to do it." In fact, in an email to FTX's US head of administration, Papa Bankman complained that his $200,000 a year salary was insufficient and that he deserved $1 million a year instead. Embarrassingly, he said that he would, quote, be putting Barbara on this, and CC'd her in the email. Getting Mum on the case was enough to do the trick. Within 2 weeks of that email, SBF's parents received a $10 million cash gift and a luxury property in the Bahamas worth over $15 million. Now, FTX US is trying to get that money back. Sadly for the Bankman-Fried family, things won't be getting much better anytime soon. Certainly not for SBF. Regardless of the outcome of this trial, he'll be back in court in March 2024 in a separate criminal trial where he'll face 5 more charges. Safe to say he's probably not got much in the diary for the foreseeable future. Well, there you have it. Everything you need to know about crypto's trial of the century. What do you think the verdict is going to be? What are you expecting from the witnesses? Will SBF himself take to the stand? And if so, will he shoot himself in the foot or manage to save some face? Before you go, if you like this video and learned something from it, please like it, share it, and make sure you subscribe to both Coin Bureau and Coin Bureau Clips. And also you can head on over to the Coin Bureau Deals page, where you can find the best discount deals and the finest crypto merch that there is. It helps support our channel and lets us continue to provide you with the best crypto content out there. Thank you for watching and see you next time.